Welcome to Florida's Wealthy Divorces, Complex Cases, Expert Advice.
Welcome to Florida's Wealthiest Divorces, Complex Cases, Expert Advice with experienced family law attorney Stacy Beaulieu-Fawcett. I'm your host, Katie Roberts, and today we're unpacking the intricacies of child support in high net worth divorces in Florida. When it comes to families with significant income, the rules of child support can be challenging to navigate. Stacy, thank you so much for joining us. Let's dive right in.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Let's kick it off. Stacy, I'm curious, what are some of the biggest challenges or concerns that your clients face when it comes to high net worth divorces and child support in Florida?
Yeah, I mean, the concerns, of course, are sometimes money related if we're talking about child support, right? Not just money related of, hey, how much am I going to have to pay? But what is the other person going to do with this money? So we talked about on the previous episodes that child support in Florida is a formula. So it's based upon a person's income. So when I have clients such as professional basketball player, he's looking at this going, okay, well, my income when we run it through the formula leaves me paying $35,000 a month. Does that make sense for child support? Of course not. Of course not, right? So, my clients are concerned about this. They want to know, I don't mind taking care of my child. I'll pay for everything for my child. I'll take care of the private school. I'll take care of all of the extracurriculars. Sometimes it's really popular right now are the sports boarding schools where they are super intensive about a particular sport. Case we just finished up had to do with hockey players. So these intensive sports boarding schools are taking these hockey players, and that's part of the curriculum. That's not hey, we practice after school, 4 or 5 days a week. It is, hey, your second period, which lasts for 4 hours, is hockey training. And so everything is around the sport. So that's kind of the focus right now for a lot of people. These schools are anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000 a year, and they're pricey. So they're not for everyone. But when you're looking at that and you think, okay, well, I don't mind paying $30,000 a month in child support, but what they don't understand sometimes, and what moms don't understand or dads don't understand, is child support is in addition to things like these private schools, or in addition to extracurriculars, and in addition to medical needs. And sometimes there are some extraordinary medical needs, but the child support's in addition. So what does the child support cover? Well, that's what everyone wants to know, right? My clients are concerned. What is this supposed to cover if I have to pay the private school and the horseback riding and pay for the horse and all of these things? What is it supposed to cover? And really, it comes down to, it's supposed to cover the expenses related to the child. Again, there's a formula. That formula calculates, and it's wrong. Okay. We all know it's wrong, but it calculates what the child is supposed to cost. Okay. Every family's living situation is different. Your costs are different for raising a child. There are the basic necessities, which you could argue are across the board, but every family's situation is different. So that child support is supposed to cover really a kind of a portion of the roof over their head. But again, are we talking about a $10 million house roof, or are we talking about $1,500 a month in rent roof? It varies, right? So it's supposed to cover the roof over their head. It's supposed to cover the food that they eat on a daily basis. If, let's say, it's dad paying child support and mom is receiving child support, mom can't then submit dad a bill for going to Panera and getting food. That's part of the child support. If you choose to take the child to fast food or to luxury food, that's up to you, but that's going to be covered in the child support. So it's supposed to include those things. Clothes. Some people think, well, he or she has to pay for the clothes too. No, each parent is responsible for having clothes for their child in their house. And child support is supposed to cover that. That can get expensive with the private schools and the uniforms that are required for the private school. But if it's a private school, if it's something required for the private school, then that's in addition to child support. So we're really not even talking about uniforms at private school. We're talking about your day-to-day clothes. Some of our teenage girls are walking around with Louis Vuitton bags. If you want to buy that for your child, that's part of child support. You don't get to send mom or dad a bill for the Louis Vuitton bag. So then we get down to, all right, if you've got a $35,000 a month child support calculation, do we really need to pay that? Are the child's needs in accordance with the lifestyle that the child is used to really add up to $35,000 a month? And a difficult argument, even in some of our top cases, it would be a difficult argument to say that it does. So what we typically do in those cases, it's negotiable, first of all. It's called good fortune child support. We don't want to just throw a lot of money at the residential parent for child support if it's not really being spent on the child. So we handle it a few different ways. All of them are negotiable, okay? And one is we say, all right, there's going to be a certain amount of money placed into an account. You're going to use it for the child. And those expenses then are run through the account. That gives a little bit of accountability for those expenses. What are they? That method, quite honestly, breeds litigation because you can't always cover every single detail of what's an okay expense, what's not.
When it comes to the formula, if a child has maybe pre-existing health conditions, how does that factor in? As well as if they are going to this really nice hockey academy, what about the injuries? Is that covered by the school? Is that something you have to build into the child support formulation?
So sometimes we have a child who has really extraordinary special needs. Maybe you have a severely autistic child that needs mom or dad, whoever is going to be that primary caregiver, to be home, or maybe needs round the clock care. Maybe, and I hate to even say it, but we've had a paraplegic child that needs round the clock care to the point where mom can't even do it alone. You need that extra help. So remember, child support doesn't include those out-of-pocket medicals. That's in addition to child support. And what typically happens for the medical piece is that there is a pro rata sharing of those expenses between the parents. What is that pro rata based on? Well, each parent pays in accordance with the percentage that their income represents of the total amount of money available. So let me break that down a little bit. If mom's income is 10% of the total income of the family, dad's is 90%, mom's is 10%, then mom's obligation to those medical expenses is 10% and dad's is 90%. If the parents' incomes are equal, then it's 50-50. That's the only time you see it being 50-50. So the medical is above and beyond the child support. But like I said, sometimes you have a situation where a parent has to not work, has to stay home because of this. And now we're looking at a situation where child support needs to cover that parent's expenses, which is not what child support is for. It's not to cover the parent's living expenses. It's only for the child. So what do we do? Well, the statute provides for that. There is an option to what's called a deviation, an upward deviation beyond the guidelines to cover those extraordinary circumstances. And that's what you're talking about there is, my case with the paraplegic, such a heartbreaking case, obviously required round the clock care. Mom would be one of those care persons, but mom does have to sleep at some point. And being a paraplegic, I can't even begin to tell you all of the needs that go into that and kind of the 24-hour observation in this particular boy's life that was involved. It really, really is. And so having home health care there was part of it. Mom staying home and being home health care for the other period of time that home health care wasn't there was part of it. And it really, you hope that both parents care about the well-being of the child enough to come together and say, okay, let's figure out how to make this work financially, and fortunately in that case, while there were some hiccups about what is really needed for care and what isn't in that case, which you can expect, right? We were able to get it done with the right input from the right experts and guidance. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick, but we got it done.
Amazing.
Yeah. So the medical is outside of it, but there are the rare situations where child support needs to cover more than the medical, to break that down for you. So that's one of the ways that we deal with all right, let's just create an account. We'll put the money in there every month, but you could only spend it on the child's expenses. But again, so much room for abuse there. We had a case where it was done that way against my advice, but listen, the client has to make the ultimate decision, right? I'm going to tell you the risks. You could choose to do that.
Yeah.
But against my advice, went this route. And next thing we know, the parent with the child was going on vacations with her boyfriend and the child internationally, of course, for a month. The child can't go on this vacation without me being there. And my boyfriend is part of my life. So my boyfriend had to be there too, and submitted the entire trip for the month as an expense. Yes. Yeah. So that's the abuse. Can we draft for that and make some tighter requirements? Absolutely. But it is still subject to abuse and people's subjective view of what's really a necessary child expense and what's not. So that's a way, not the preferred way. Another way that we deal with it is we figure out, we use forensic accountants, for example, for this, another role of the forensic accountant, and we figure out what has truly and historically been the child's needs. Is the child really costing $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month? Or $35,000 a month. And typically we land, it's funny because you do these over and over again, you start to see a range of, all right, where are the kids landing? And again, remember, this doesn't count the private schools and the extracurriculars and the medical. This is just, all right, the day-to-day. We're dining out, we're doing some things as a family, whatever. But, it typically lands around that $5,000 a month mark, $5,000 to $7,000. It lands right in there. So when we involve the forensic accountants and we calculate that, what are the true needs of the child? And this is one of the methods to resolve this. That's about where it lands. So sometimes the parties are able to agree, okay, then that's going to be the child support amount. We're not going to do this accounting. I'm not going to have to get expenses approved. This is just the amount, and this is what we're going to live with. Sometimes people negotiate where they say, okay, that's the amount you're going to pay the custodial parent. And that's not really a term in Florida, so I don't want to mislead people, but people understand when I say that, what I'm talking about. The parent where the child spends the time, the parent that would be receiving the child support. Mm-hmm. And so that's the amount we're going to pay. And then what do we do with that calculation with the bigger number? And oftentimes what we'll do is we'll set up a trust for the balance, because right now that might be the child's expenses, but we may be in a situation where we end up, I hate saying it out loud, but we end up with a severely disabled child, a paraplegic, or something to where mom does have to give round the clock care. You just don't know what life is going to bring. Mm-hmm. And so we want to plan for the worst and hope for the best. So we'll set a trust for the balance. That trust will go in for the child. Hey, if it's never needed, great. There's money for the child. We don't give an 18-year-old hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's dumb. We don't do that. But we'll set up the trust so that maybe at different periods in the child's life, that money is there and available. Typically, we'll put some provisions in for a car when it's time, when both parents agree that a car is the appropriate next step. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we'll go as far as to consider what kind of car, because mom or dad may want the child to drive a super horsepowered sports car. And the other parent may say, no, I have an adrenaline junkie child, and that is not the right step for this child, or we will end up in that special needs situation. So I like for the parents to have to agree on the nature of that car. I also like it so that we avoid one parent trying to buy the child. We don't want that. We ruin kids when we start doing that. Yeah. That's another way to deal with that big number of child support that doesn't really make sense for supporting the child.
Extremely informative. I had no idea all the intricacies that went into not only the child support, but then everything else financially that goes into the division of assets and the 90% for the salary. I'm curious, because people get promotions. Is that allocation changed when the wife gets a promotion and is making 20% more?
So it's a really good question. And it's one that comes up frequently, right? It comes up a lot of times because when people are going into a divorce, suddenly their income is lower, right? So, we go from maybe the wife was earning $1 million a year and now divorce planning, and suddenly she's not earning anything right now. So the divorce planners will sometimes reduce their income before going into a divorce. So that increase in income later becomes super important. Most of the time, we don't put in automatic changes. And the reason we don't do that is because the goal is to keep these two people from having to intertwine their lives again and again and again. We want to create an agreement and a settlement that really cuts ties, if you will, as far as the two of them financially, and allows both of them to go on and live their life without the constant, let's get the forensic accountant to look at what the income was this year. Because these aren't normally W-2 earners. These are normally business owners, multiple businesses. And so calculating income isn't as easy as just, let's look at the W-2. Let's look at the tax return. Well, that's not the real income. It never is.
So much.
Right. So it's not that easy. And you don't want them in constant litigation for the next 18 years while their child is growing up. So we don't typically put in an automatic, if you get a raise or you sell a business or buy a new business, we're going to change it. But by statute, it's always modifiable. So if something big does happen, either side at any time by statute can come back and modify any aspect of child support. So our professional athletes, we had a baseball player that got severely injured, like retirement injured. Obviously, his income changes. He can't keep paying astronomical numbers across the board. We have to modify. We have to modify everything: child support, alimony. We have to look at whether private school is still affordable. Yeah, life changes. But you know what? You married a professional baseball player. You knew that their career was conditioned upon their ability to play. You signed up for it. So it's always modifiable because things change. That's an easier situation to know that things have changed, right? Someone is injured, they're disabled, their employment has changed. Okay, fine. The more difficult one is when you have, for example, you have a mom who was running a successful business. Suddenly the business is doing poorly because she's getting divorced. Numbers are lower. At what point do you know that the business is doing great again? And that's the hard part. Those are the ones that you don't know whether to modify because you don't know if the business and her income has taken off, because you're not constantly exchanging financial documents. Divorce is done. These numbers are calculated. How do you know whether it's worth modifying? You don't. And so that's the more difficult situation.
I have a question. So in that specific example that you just provided, could you tell the client, I see you have two small businesses. Please let us know when you see, a drop in sales or a rise in sales so that we can be more proactive about how we adjust the existing terms of the divorce?
Absolutely. So for our clients, as we're wrapping things up, part of it is, okay, if these numbers change, they've been through a long process with this. So they know how the numbers are calculated. We make sure that they understand that their income changes everything, of course. So those clients know, all right, if something happens and my business tanks, I need to call Stacy because we need to change these numbers. And we'll have that conversation. This is not a sustainable number for you if you have a year like you did back in 2008, and they know that. They know it's not a sustainable number. So we'll be modifying. But it's the client that I'm not going to look at my client and say, hey, if you have a really good year, call me because we want to increase your child support.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Maybe the other side's business took off. Maybe they took the business public. That's easy to find out, right? I can see that. I know that. But you've got privately held companies that aren't public. We can't watch the market. We can't see what's going on with them. Did they take off to where we should be modifying upward? We don't know. So the only thing you can really do is, did they trade in the $2 million house for a $15 million house? You look at things that are going on in their life. And if you see the change in lifestyle, okay, red flag. We know something's going on.
Making the wisest fiscal decisions.
Sometimes, but sometimes not.
Flashy things. You catch your eye.
It's hard to hide those things. Those flashy
for sure. That brings us to the end of our show today. Stacy, thank you so much for your time. And thank you for tuning in to Florida's Wealthy Divorces, Complex Cases, Expert Advice with Stacy Beaulieu-Fawcett. To connect with Stacy, head to blgfl.com. Like, subscribe, review, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.